What's up, fellas? In this video, we're going to be learning how to kill some ducks. Let's get straight into this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, of course, today in class, we're going to be learning how to kill some of these magnificent ducks. Now, some of you fellas may have it down, some of you fellas may not have it down, but today, fellas, we're going to be learning new techniques, or all techniques in general, how to kill some of these king daddy mallards and other ducks, of course. So, fellas, first things first, where can you find yourself such a king daddy mallard? Now, these could be in all other areas, and this is including other ducks. You can find them in a field, you can find them in a swamp, you can find them in a river, you can find them in the lake, you can find them anywhere. You just gotta use your eyeballs, and of course, you gotta scout. You gotta scout and look for them, because fellas, if you're not scouting for them, let me tell you, you're not gonna kill any ducks, or you're not gonna kill as many ducks, because, let me tell you fellas, flagging for these things, it's like flagging for geese. You're just gonna get a lot less. Even though you have a bunch of them flying over, you're not gonna be getting the hordes of geese unless you have 1,000 decoys, and even still, if you're not where they are, you're not gonna kill any. So fellas, finding them is key. Now, where would I find them? Well, go to your public land hunting areas. I mean the absolute most degenerate of swamps, rivers, and other such places, because fellas, if you can find these bastards on public land when they're hot, but fellas, beware, I mean, not beware, be on the notice that if on public land you see other hunters, make it known where you are, because you just don't want to get shot, of course. Now, other thing you can do, private land. Now, this can lead you some amazing hunts, of course. This could be either in a field, or it could be in a swamp, or it could be in a river, anywhere private. And the good thing about private land is, fellas, these bastards, there's not going to be much competition. I mean, if you do it right, you can kill yourself a whole flock. But fellas, as far as scouting goes, you always have to be on the lookout. You cannot stop scouting, because these bastards, they're not like deer. They're not going to have themselves like kind of a home range, let's just say. These bastards are going to go hop, the hop, the hop, the hop, hop, the pond, the swamp, the field, the field. They do not sit in one spot. They're just in this area in a certain time frame, usually, unless they leave like a bunch of assholes. But they're usually there for a short while, so you gotta be there when they're there. Then you gotta move with them, pretty much. So fellas, always scout throughout the whole entire season. So fellas, next step is calling. Now, all you fellas know about calling. But fellas, there's a lot more that goes into duck calling than just pulling a duck call like this. There's a lot more that goes into calling. And I know, fellas, I ain't no championship caller. But fellas, it's better to know how to call at ducks than actually becoming a championship duck caller that sounds like a bunch of ducks. Because fellas, if you just keep on blowing your duck call at them, you're not gonna get as many ducks as you can if you do it the right way. Because fellas, if you sound loud and start quacking, squacking, and do all these sorts of junk, like I said, fellas, you're not gonna be killing them. But if you sound more like this, if you sound more like that, not that entire like thing I just did, because that's just kind of all the sounds I do when I'm out there calling at them. But fellas, if you sound more realistic, I promise you fellas, you'll be killing more ducks. Now fellas, there's of course times to be aggressive. I mean, if they're flying away, you throw out the whole kitchen sink at them. But fellas, if you see them come in and they're starting to tip their wings, make it look like they're about to land, you want to be more realistic. You want to be a little more quiet, because they're doing what you want. They're about to land and they're about to die. So fellas, if a thing to remember is, if they're coming in like you want, don't do anything to mess up. But fellas, if they're just bombing out of there, just throw the whole entire kitchen sink at them, because at that point, if they're moving away, it doesn't even matter. But fellas, for some of you guys that don't know what the sound mean, here's just examples of calls that I do and what they do and what they sound like. Now fellas, this is the feeding call. Now fellas, if you notice, I put in a little quack there, and I was really slow with it, because ducks, they don't just machine gun in there, because they don't feed like that. They feed more quietly, they feed more slowly. And fellas, I'm not saying a duck is ever, feed fast, but I'm saying is, more or less of the time, they're not just sounding like a goddamn machine gun. They sound more quiet because they're actually eating. Now fellas, it's time for the quack. Now, fellas, everyone's heard the quack. They make the sound when they're flying, when they're sitting, when they're on the water. They just make the sound. It's more like a calm sound, just like a reinsurance of like, I'm a duck. Now, fellas, it's time for what I like to call the comeback call. Now, fellas, I like to do this call obviously when they're flying away or if they're kind of like circling. Not sure, they're not coming in, so I like to throw that at them. Now, fellas, this actually means that it's kind of a welcome call to them. Like, it's kind of like a hey, 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 hey for ducks, pretty much. Like, if they're flying, they do this at actual ducks. And also, fellas, I use both acrylic and a wooden call. I just have two. I don't have like 5, 4, 3 different mallard calls. I like this one because it's a little more quieter and it's a little more raspier, and I like this one because it's really loud and I can really feed chuckle on this thing. So, fellas, it's honestly what you prefer, but you don't need like 10 calls. You just need either 1 or 2. Pretty much 1. Especially if you're starting out. Now, fellas, I almost forgot. We have other duck calls. Now, we're going to start with the wood duck. Now, you have yourself a king daddy mallard. You have yourself a male blue-winged teal. You have yourself a pintail. And you have yourself a widgeon. And fellas, we have motion decoys. Now, these are pretty much calls because they make ripples in the water, they make movement with the decoys, and makes the decoys look a lot more lifelike because a bunch of same plastic on the water is nowhere compared to a bunch of moving ducks making all the splashes, making all that movement, that glorious movement, because fellas, ducks love that kind of movement. Now, fellas, there's all sorts of motion decoy calls like the splashers, the ass rumblers, and of course spinning decoys, but my favorite is the motion jerk rig decoys because you can control the amount of motion you put out. You can make those ripples bigger, you can make them smaller. You used to make a lot more motion, I believe, with the jerk rigs, but fellas, all sorts of motion decoys work. But fellas, remember, with the spinning wing decoys, I've noticed at least that later in the year the ducks don't like that. They get pretty sketched out. They get sketched out by lots of decoys because later in the year, after they've been shot over a million times, a lot of times they'll just land way, way off and swim over. Or not swim at all because they're just a bunch of degenerates. But fellas, motion decoys, invest in. Now, fellas, now we're going to go into duck identification and, of course, decoying. Now, to start off this shindig, we have ourselves a queen mallard. I mean, this bastard is quite the heifer. Next, we have ourselves a male wood duck decoy. I mean, it's quite brand new, quite voluptuous and seductive for the ducks, of course. Now, we have ourselves a little bit of a rough pintail. I mean, she's seen better days, but it'll do the job making them pintails want to come down and, of course, get a little bit feisty. Now, fellas, there are many types of decoys, of course. You can get any type of decoy, like a gadwall, a golden eye, a ganser, of course. But, fellas, one thing to remember is ducks will land with ducks. And just because you have mallard decoys, it's not like this wood duck's gonna go, hell no. I've seen wood ducks land with my mallard decoys. I've seen mallards land with wood duck decoys. But fellas, remember, if you have more of these bad boys out, you're gonna get a lot more of, that target species, like a wood duck. Now, fellas, there are many types of decoy spreads you can do. I mean, you can do a U, you can do a broken U, you can do yourself a X, you can do yourself a Y, you can do yourself a straight line, you can do yourself a runway. The main thing you gotta remember, fellas, is just you gotta make it realistic and make it so the ducks can funnel in to wherever the hell you are, because if you can't not funnel them and, bring them in, because, fellas, they'll land way off or they'll just breeze by you because they can't land because you just made it hard for them. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to land and where you can shoot them. And fellas, one way to, get a good idea and grasp of this realistic decoy spread is look at ducks. Live ducks, I mean, just go to your local pond, go to your local swamp, and go to your local river or lake or whatever. Look at ducks. See how they move around. See how they like to form up. You want to make it like that. But fellas, they mainly pair up in like 2s, 3s, and 4s. They're not a big one usual clump. Not all the time. I mean, I've seen it before. Not usually. Usually they're all near the reeds, near the shore, feeding within groups of 2 to 3 and sometimes 4. Now, fellas, there's a little debate going on in the duck hunting world. Well, not really debate, but more just experiment. What is better to hunt, fields or water? But fellas, here is a secret. They both are. I mean, wherever the ducks are is a good spot in my opinion. It could be in a field. If there's ducks in it, I'm hunting that field. If they're on the water, I'm hunting on the water. It's wherever the ducks are, because if you can be where the ducks are, you're gonna get yourself a lot more ducks, because flagging for ducks, it could be a pain in the ass. I mean, it is doable, of course. I mean, people have gotten limits flagging them in, but it is way easier if you can just be where they want to be. Obviously, that's not gonna happen always. You're always gonna be either just off, you can't get there, it happens. But if you can just be where they want to be, everything's just easier. Everything will just fall into place easier. You don't have to be perfect. You just gotta be where they want to be, because if they want to be there, a lot of mistakes can be covered up, like bad calling, bad decoy placement. Everything will just become easier. But fellas, the differences between water hunting and field hunting, they're different, of course. I mean, it's easier in my opinion to bring decoys out into the field, but in my personal experience, it's easier to get more ducks that go on the water than in the field. Not always. I find it that they're on the water way more than when they're in the field. In my personal experience, the ducks stay on in that spot on the water longer than they do in the field. Not always, but in my experience, they want to be usually in that spot on the water more than they do in the field. I'm not saying that fields cannot hold ducks for long periods of time. I just find on the water, they just stay there longer. And of course, where I'm from, it's easier to find water spots and actually places to hunt these ducks on fields where they are. Now fellas, I hope of course you guys learned something or acquired a new skill about duck hunting, because this is not a complete full guide on how to kill ducks. I'm just hoping that what I spoke will help a new hunter or more experienced weathered hunter learn something, of course. And hopefully you guys kill yourself a limit, because that's what we're all here for. Kill ducks. Thanks for watching. If you guys want to see your last duck hunting video down here. Of course, you guys want to see your last hunting video down here. But besides that, I'll see y'all next video. See ya.